All right, and we are live.
All right, good morning, everyone. I will now call to order Apex Town Council special meeting for Thursday, March 25th, 2021. And the purpose of this meeting is to take action on public hearing items from our council meeting that was held on Tuesday, March 23rd, to allow for public comments before motion and vote by council. So before we get started, let's do a roll call attendance. And when I call your name, council, please respond with here. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Killingsworth.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Gant.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Stallings.
Here.
All right, thanks. And Councilmember Mahaffey.
Here.
Thank you, sir. All right, we have a full council, so what we'll do is go through the agenda items and to ask staff to summarize each item, and then we will go to move to opening public hearing, and also to have council to weigh in and have a discussion before the motion and vote. So we'll start with public hearing number 1 with Shannon Cox, and this is 20 CZ 12, and this is a public hearing of possible motion regarding proposed transportation plan amendments associated with rezoning 20 CZ 12 Felton Grove High School.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Just to provide a brief summary,
We discussed proposed amendments in relation to the proposed high school, which included both changes to the collector street network as shown on this slide, both the minor collector streets and the east-west major collector street removal, and then the change in designation of Arrowhead Drive. And then we also discussed changes to the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map, which correspond with the collector street changes, and then add the future greenway from the high school to Smith Road Extension and Middle Creek Greenway. And we did not have public comments regarding these proposed amendments.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and open up public hearing for this item. And as you just mentioned, we didn't have any more comments. So we will close public hearing at this time. And the item will be moved to council for discussion leading to a possible motion to approve.
Mayor Gilbert, I have a question for staff.
Okay, go ahead.
Did both Dairy Down Lane and Thriftwood Drive, are you aware of, do they have enough right of way to expand those roads since those are DOT roads?
So I know that there's discussion regarding both of those roadways, and I think potential future improvements aren't something that we can discuss during this public hearing, is my awareness. So regarding existing right-of-way, I don't think that I can address that today, and they are not the focus of the proposed amendments that we have. If anybody else needs to weigh in, I see Shelley unmuted at one point. They can jump in as well.
I think you did an excellent job, Shannon. That's perfectly fine. I have nothing to add.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I know that doesn't answer the question.
No, it doesn't. And I think it's very relevant because if we're limiting if we're taking away the ability to expand roads in this area, we need to make sure that other areas are able to expand. And, you know, with this being potential DOT roads, I just wanted to make sure that they have enough right of way through there so that those roads could be expanded to this high school.
Member Killingsworth, this is Shelley. I think that we can fill you in on the existing state of the roads without muddying the waters for the quasi-judicial public hearing. Based on a plat that was filed when the subdivision was created, there is supposed to be a 60-foot right-of-way, and only roughly 20 feet of that is paved. I can't get into any discussion about whether or not there is anything in that right-of-way that shouldn't be, because I honestly don't know. And we don't know how much space we may need. And that's not something we can discuss in this hearing either. But based on a plat that was recorded when the development was made, it looks like there should be a 60-foot right-of-way around these ribbon paved roads.
Okay, I think that gives me enough information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions for staff? Or further discussion by council before a motion and a vote? Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve Stallings.
Okay, motion to approve Stallings, thank you. Is there a second to the vote?
Second, Gant.
All right, second Gant. Thank you. Further discussion before voting? All right, hearing none, we'll move to the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no, and we'll do a roll call. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier,
Aye.
okay. Councilmember Killingsworth,
Aye.
thank you. Councilmember Gant,
Aye.
thanks. Councilmember Stallings,
Aye.
Councilmember Mahaffey.
Aye.
All right, it passed unanimously. Thank you. We'll move now to public hearing number 2, and this is public hearing and possible motion to approve rezoning application 20CZ12, and that's also combined with public hearing 3 on the annexation. So, Ms. Mayo.
Thank you,
Ms. Mayo,
sir.
okay.
Sorry about that. Too many screens. As you mentioned, this is the rezoning case for Felton Grove High School. We've already discussed that it's in the southeastern corner of the town's jurisdiction, and the applicant is proposing to rezone this to add school uses with a variety of conditions that we discussed on Tuesday. If you'd like me to recap any of those, I'm happy to do so. We did receive several emails in the public hearings.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff before we go to the emails, or even for, I think Ms. Parker may be present as well. Ms. Mayo, does the applicant wish to present any other details before we move forward?
The applicant would like to give a brief presentation in order to answer some of the concerns that have arisen since Tuesday's meeting.
Okay, I will accept that at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the council. I appreciate your time. Before I address the public comments that I think you're about to receive, I would like to follow up on 2 questions that came up before. I had partial information and wanted to confirm it. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier had a question about the cafeteria sizing, and I wanted to confirm that our standards take the school capacity, divide it by 3 dining periods, and then calculate an appropriate square footage per student to determine the cafeteria size. In this situation, we have also added a cushion to provide for the potential for crowding. So the cafeteria is sized actually larger than the current capacity. What's been very interesting that in recent years, which has been a benefit during COVID, we have also added additional collaboration spaces and outdoor dining opportunities so that we have flexibility for dining opportunities beyond the cafeteria space on its own. So I hope that's helpful in providing clarity on her question there. She also had a question regarding our student parking. You'll be pleased to know that the town of Apex has the most stringent parking expectations in the county. In fact, the UDO requires 295 parking spaces more than our typical standards. Our intended plans will accommodate UDO compliance. So student parking is as large as it gets anywhere in the county, and that's what I think you'll see coming. So I hope that's helpful. There has been some question about the notice provided that came up in the earlier meeting, specifically regarding the tenants. And I wanted to clarify, I know staff mentioned this to the planning board. I'm not sure if they mentioned it to you, but we comply with the town's UDO, like any town's UDO, that requires notice to landowners based on their distance from our site. There's not a way for us to identify tenants, whether it's an apartment building or a mobile home park or any sort of multifamily situation. Tenants aren't able to be discovered through the Wake County website, whether they own a mobile home or live in a rental unit. There's not any way to look them up through the Wake County tax base. The expectation, of course, is that when a landlord or an owner is provided the notice for our rezoning hearings, for our site rezoning meetings, for our site planning public meetings, that notice would be shared with the tenants. From the public information you've received from these tenants, it just doesn't appear that happened. We are very mindful of our neighbors. We want to be good neighbors, and we would love to be able to rectify that. I understand that you're about to receive a public comment that includes a petition from some of those neighbors. I've had a discussion with our facilities design and construction group and project team. They'll be the ones bringing forward the site plan to you when it's ready to come forward. Had we had the address information from the tenants, we would have absolutely welcomed their presence at our earlier meetings. Had they been provided that notice, they would have been welcomed immediately. And I think from the tenor of some of their concerns regarding eviction, or the fact that they believe we're going to put the school in their neighborhood, I think it's clear that there's confusion, and we want to be part of that solution. So the FD&C team has gathered rather quickly, and we're willing to offer to do a reprise of our site plan public meeting for the tenants. We're happy to reach out to them as best we possibly can, and we're happy to do that before the site plan meeting so that any comments can be shared back with staff as we would have with the original site plan meeting. It's certainly unfortunate, but again, we want to be good neighbors, and the way to do that is to help them understand what's being planned, receive their input, listen to their concerns, try to find solutions where we can, and be sure that they understand the timing and how our teams will be reaching out to work with them to be sure they know what's going to happen and when in our site development process once we get to that point. So we're willing to commit to that. We hope that will be helpful for them. It is just unfortunate that it's evolved the way it has, but I think with the information that I understand has been submitted, we finally have the information to be able to do that, although it hadn't been shared with them before by the landowner. So we're happy to do that. I hope that's very helpful. There also has been a whole lot made about the road access and the lawsuit. I'm happy to answer any questions you wish. From our perspective, some incorrect statements have been made. I don't really want to get into that at this point, but we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. With that, let me pause because I don't want to preempt your public comment. I am here, I am available. I will be glad to answer any questions you have on this matter, and we'll be glad to stay as long as needed. Thank you for the time to speak.
All right, thank you, Ms. Parker. All right, with that, are there any questions? Well, actually, we'll say that. Let's go to the public hearing now. We'll open up public hearing for comments now. And we could go to, you say you had emails, Ms. Mayo?
I do, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I received 5 separate emails from the residents. To summarize, their concerns are possible future eviction, and they make a point to say that this is a low-income neighborhood that's been heavily impacted by the pandemic. So finding alternative places to live, whether that means moving their mobile homes or having to find other types of living situation, would be very difficult for them. One resident was particularly concerned that their home may have to move during the construction, and they're all very concerned about the higher traffic, the potential for higher traffic and construction traffic. They currently have a very low traffic volume neighborhood, and the kids play freely throughout the neighborhood. The largest area for gathering, according to several neighbors, is on Thriftwood Drive near the entrance. We also received the petition from the residents with 130 signatures. I believe that was sent to all town council as well. The concerns from this are that the construction impacts near their neighborhood. They've also requested that the school consider finding a different entrance and exit for the school because of the children who play in the neighborhood and the streets and the potential for accidents to occur in the future. And then some residents have homes near the roads that may have to be moved and this is very concerning to them as well. In addition, we received an email from Mr. Cummelander, who represents the family that owns the adjacent mobile home park. I will read that out for you. He says, Dear Mayor and fellow board members, the remote participation policy encourages contact with elected officials on matters of public importance. Therefore, I want to call your attention to several impressions created at last night's public hearing that require clarification and amplification. First, despite statements made at the hearing, the school system has not been mindful of its neighbors in this process. Rather, the school system has sued its neighbor to gain access to its property through Thriftwood Drive and Dairy Down. Their lawsuit asserts unresolved and complex questions of law about ownership of these streets. The lawsuit is pending, and it is premature for this board to act upon this rezoning until a judge issues orders in the case. Second, while the town is not required to notify the residents of Briarwood about this rezoning, as a matter of fairness and mindfulness to its neighbors, the school system should have included the residents in the community meeting notice and public hearing notices. The residents pay ad valorem taxes on their homes, and their addresses are easily available from the tax records. The residents are the ones most affected by this rezoning, but were excluded from participation. Third, please visit our neighborhood. You'll see that accessing the high school through Briarwood community of nearly 500 residents creates great safety risks for the children and the families that live here. Accessing a high school site through any other Apex neighborhood, for example, Shepherd's Vineyard or Cameron Park, would be unthinkable. Nonetheless, the school system has targeted a lower socioeconomic neighborhood with its lawsuit and rezoning, and has intentionally excluded the affected owners and residents of Briarwood. The rezoning does not comply with the legislative mandate set out in the UDO. The applicant lists the sections specifically and says to see page 390 of the agenda package dated March 23rd. We ask that you deny the petition or at least delay the decision so that the above matters can be addressed. That was the extent of the comments that we received.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Mayo. All right, with that, no other comments are available, so we'll go ahead and close public hearing at this time for public comments, and then we'll move the item now to council for discussion, leading to a possible motion and a vote. So start discussion this time, and I have Mayor Pro Tem Dozier. Councilmember Killingsworth.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, got it. Go ahead.
Did you want to go ahead on? I'm sorry. Okay. So just had some thoughts from the from folks reaching out to us and from your presentation, and thank you for coming back to present today. So just a couple of things, just to note that I think that our key is to look at things from a few lenses of equity, of the type of the community impact, of the perception from the community who's most directly impacted, and from the pandemic. I think also agreeing with some of the things around language access and related to access, you know, this can't be the first time where there's people who own property and people are renting. So whether it's a larger piece of property or smaller pieces, there needs to be, if there's not a proactive plan to engage the landowners, the landlords. So instead of an assumption that they're going to do the right thing or that they can, some of them are not present and maybe would. So I think that then, we've talked about this before here with other projects, is that then it puts people at risk of feeling like they're going to be without a home and that kind of thing. So those feelings then adds extra stress, and I think that's, you know, not helpful. in this process to get people to get on our side, or, you know, about a project or something, for lack of a better word. So I think that, you know, while the process is about 300 feet and all that, you know, I think in situations like this, I think it's better to go beyond if we can. And so I do think the thing around, you know, we have ratepayers and taxpayers, that there are other ways to let people know, and just more signage and inviting people in that way could have been things to be more proactive instead of reactive. I think we're in reactive mode. And I do think it's great to have another public meeting. There might need to be 2 public meetings. I also think that when we think of things with a sense of urgency, sometimes we make mistakes. And so I think despite this timeline that we have, it's more important for me to embed the experiences and the voices of people and what they might be dealing with. And I am in favor of not this sense of urgency, of slowing things down to make sure we do things better and right. So those are my comments.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Dozier. Councilmember Killingsworth.
I'd like to echo some of the things that Mayor Pro Tem Dozier said, specifically relating to renters, making sure that they are aware as well. I know that's not currently what our UDO says, but my understanding is Raleigh just upgraded theirs to include renters and sending to the physical address instead of the landowner. That way to engage the current community that lives there. So I think that needs to be something on our radar, as well as language in our development signs. You know, we do have them in English, but maybe we need to provide them in Spanish as well on the properties. That way everyone has the opportunity to understand what's happening. You know, I am very much, I was asking about the roads earlier, and I know that's a completely separate issue that we voted on before, but they are linked. You know, being able to expand these roads to safety standards through NCDOT is pretty important. So that's something that's on my radar as well with this. I know that we need seats. We definitely need seats. And this is going to provide, from my understanding, 2,200 seats, a little bit more than that, which is desperately needed in this area. So my plan is to vote for this, but I do think this is a big learning opportunity for us to revisit some of the things that we have done, and the way of doing things needs to be upgraded so that we can include the entire community.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Killingsworth. Councilmember Stallings.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Parker, for your presentation and for clarifying the cafeteria question and the parking question, and also the issue with the tenants. And to also echo my colleagues, I think we can learn from this situation, and I think it's important we can't change what's happened, but we can change how we move forward and how we can learn from it and do better. So I would like to ask our planning committee to possibly take a look at this to see how we could include tenants moving forward, and so we could update and amend our UDO on this issue. I think we can learn from that. And Ms. Bay, I would like to ask, I agree that we have neighborhood meetings and definitely involve the tenants. And given that it's my understanding that a number of these tenants are Spanish speaking, to make sure we have someone who is a Spanish speaker involved in that process to facilitate that discussion, I think would be really helpful. One of the biggest thing I'm hearing is they are feeling not heard. And so we want them to be heard, and we definitely want them to, or I want them to participate and be heard. And I think that will go a long way. I too will plan on supporting this because we need the school capacity, but I think we can do better at making sure these tenants are heard and can collaborate with us moving forward, especially addressing safety of their children in the neighborhood. And Ms. Parker, can you answer, will any homes need to be moved as part of the construction, or do we know that yet?
Our expectation is no. Since these roads were established as public rights of way some 35 years ago, it doesn't logically follow that any home would have been placed within that right of way. So from what we've been able to see on the ground, I don't think so. About the only interaction we would expect in improving the road to state standards would be realigning the ditches and being sure that any driveway connections are appropriate, culverts under the driveways, things like that. I'm not aware of any homes in there. And to Ms. Killingsworth's point, I understand from staff's perspective, we really shouldn't speak about roads. I would give you this one sort of illustration that might give you an idea of the development ability of a 60-foot right-of-way. The right-of-way in front of Balcom Elementary School for 100 Street is 60 feet. So if you're familiar with that, that may give you at least a mental picture of what can occur within a 60-foot right-of-way. I realize I'm dancing close to a line, and I certainly don't want to bring up anything inappropriate, but that may be helpful.
And just a couple more comments. Thank you, Ms. Parker. I would like to ask, and I'm sure you will, during the neighborhood meetings, please make sure you address traffic issues, safety issues for children, and also just the impact, the impact of the construction on the neighborhood, so that these residents are fully informed and have the opportunity to speak and share what they need to. I'm sure you will do that, but I just wanted to ask that as well. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We're committed to that. We've already had discussions about the notices going out in both English and Spanish. We have some native Spanish speakers on our team who are planning to be there to assist. So we're looking forward to that. We'll be glad to have a thorough discussion. Hopefully we'll have more information from DOT in advance of that meeting so that we'll be able to share the most realistic picture of what the road changes will be with the tenants.
And finally, just one more question. Can we stay on schedule and also have these neighborhood meetings at the same time? Can all of this work on the timetable?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. We're also mindful of COVID restrictions. We want to be sure that we honor DHHS and the governor's restrictions on gatherings. So our intention is to have multiple meetings probably in the same evening to be sure that we honor those capacity limitations and provide everybody an opportunity to see the full information provided, answer any questions that are had. And of course, as with any public meeting, we'll be able to provide a summary of those conversations back to town staff and to share with council in advance of the site plan hearing.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stallings. Council Member Mahaffey.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll say Councilmember Stallings brought up many of the points that I was going to raise. And I was just to reiterate, I feel like the issue here with the notification is partially on the town, because what's the rules being followed by the applicant were our rules that we published. And I do think this highlights the deficiency in those rules. And I'm committed to bringing this issue up in planning committee to find creative ways to expand the notification to communities like this. Multiple languages, obviously, a very good point that we need to consider for our signage, notification to renters when appropriate, all those things. So as my colleague said, this is an issue I do want to address in our planning committee and find ways that we can update those rules. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilman Gant.
Thank you, Mayor. Seems like we're doing the discussion phase before any motion. I thought I'd like to chime in real quick and say that I know that we have capacity issues. I think everybody does. That's like the gorilla in the room here. But I strongly believe that the policy toward having suburban types high schools with sports facilities and not adjusting to the reality that land is expensive and difficult to find large tracts at this point. I think that policy has led us to a site here near a landfill with near a neighborhood is going to have some issues, I think, or at least disruptions, and poor egress and entrances. I give it a D maybe as a site, and I guess maybe that's not quite failing, but it's pretty low. So I plan to vote against this because I think that policy has led us to this subpar site, and that will have problems for 50 years, like Ms. Parker said about the lifetime of these things. And this crunch we have right now with the capacity, I think we'll have problems for years with this school in terms of the traffic, in terms of that landfill, however that's going to interact with the school. So I plan to vote against this.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. And I just want to add, I am concerned, but I understand there is a need, and what my colleagues pointed out with communication. What I would like to add is that when you do that, when you move forward, if you would reach out to community members, community leaders who are influential from faith communities that really know the people in that area, if you can involve them in that process, that will help out quite a bit, and that there's a better understanding of what's going on. And I would just like to offer that as a part of the solution with communication. So thank you for your presentation, Ms. Parker. Ms. Stallings.
Right, and I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Gant. I think this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is part of an evolving conversation that needs to happen, that we as a council and staff and landowners and developers and schools and our elected officials at the county and state level have to continue this conversation about how we're going to meet the needs of our children and school capacity issues. So I agree that there's a lot of work to be done, but I am opening the invitation for all of us to continue this work as we move forward. I don't have the answers, but I am definitely willing to be engaged in this conversation because it's one that we continue needs to be had.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Councilmember Killingsworth.
Just one more clarification question. The landfill that is to the south of this has no chemical component to this whatsoever. Is that correct?
That is correct, ma'am.
Okay. So
It is
go ahead.
not a problem. It's considered an inert debris landfill. So it only has things like stumps and that kind of thing from clearing land, and then things like concrete and brick, et cetera, that have no chemical components that would damage anything.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, further discussion. Anyone else? All right, Councilman Gant.
Yes, I just, because you mentioned my name from Councilwoman Stallings, I think those conversations need to be had, and probably needed to have been had in the past at this point, and I wish they had been. I would argue a denial of this would ensure that conversation happens rapidly. So if you really want this conversation to be had, I think a denial will force the issue. Personally, so that's just my reaction to maybe it'll happen anyway, but the urgency will be much heightened if there is a denial of this.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
Thank you, Mayor. I just to sort of reiterate what I was saying before, I'm just going to sum it up to it's hard to embed the voices of people most directly impacted at the same time. You're running and listening at the same time. And so I think that the things that I brought up, the values that I brought up are consistent with Wake County Public Schools values around equity and inclusion, and all of those things are consistent with your values as a school system. And I do know that notices go out in different languages to parents and things like that. So I do believe this could have been done a little bit better. Yes, I think we could have done better as a town too. But reality is that people feel that they may have to move. They feel that they have not been heard. They feel that there is some environmental issues related to them. And until those things are addressed well and first, and then those things are embedded into the next steps, I will not support this project until those things get embedded. Because if not, they're not going to get embedded at the same time. You're going to be moving at the same time. And we want folks to this should be done consistent with Wake County Schools goals, Wake County's goals, and ours. in this moment too, where people are going to be neighbors of this beautiful school, but they will also be part of the school community and perhaps attend the school if they don't move from the area. So.
All right, great comments. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Councilwoman Stallings.
I just want to say I appreciate the comments from both Councilmember Gant and Mayor Pro Tem Dozier. I think we can approve this project and meet the needs if we have the will to do so. If we have the will to continue this conversation, we'll do it. And I, for one, have the will to continue the conversation about school capacity for our families. And Mayor Pro Tem, I hear your comments. I'm hearing from Ms. Parker that both can happen. And are you saying you have concerns that it can't in terms of, meeting the neighbors' needs, meeting the tenants' needs while also moving forward? Is that your concern?
Thank you, Councilmember Stallings. My concern is that I'm part of a school system that I know that does things very well related to these values that I just mentioned, but it didn't happen here. So what I'm saying to you is that we don't have a whole lot of influence related to that. If we don't come to the table right now and say, this is like, let's stop, let's slow down, and what is the plan? What is a written plan and timeline for addressing the needs? I don't want to look like I am approving without really addressing all of those needs and having a timeline for how those things are going to happen. For people who are already there, who many are renters, for people who are buying houses, and now and in the future, it does not look and feel right to me.
I'm trying to understand what you're proposing as a solution, Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm proposing as a solution to say, we're just like we did at the middle school here around safety. It's like, I'm proposing that we stop right now, take a breath and take a step, and all of the different stakeholders, like the mayor mentioned too, have a meeting with the school system and let's have a plan for addressing these needs right now versus, okay, we're gonna go ahead and approve it and then just see what happens, about some of these things. I'm not willing to do that based on the values that the school system itself has and the perception of people who have communities that we've just mentioned are communities of color, communities of different language understanding, and communities who are renters, for people who are able to buy homes. That is, the growth is driving. It doesn't feel right to me. I don't want to appear that I am not thinking of everyone, the need for people creating for growth, which is a good problem to have, but also the thoughts and the and experiences and the feelings of people who are mostly, I'm understanding, are renters and have low incomes. I want to balance all those things. And I think by supporting this now, then supports more of the people who are buying the new houses, who need the new school, versus the people who are already going to school somewhere, and are not property owners, for the majority that I have heard from.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Stallings.
And thank you for that clarification, Mayor Pro Tem. And I'm just trying to understand from Ms. Parker, given what you've just heard, Ms. Parker, can you help lay out a plan as to how you think this potentially could be addressed?
Yes, ma'am. I think what's important to note is what we're seeking today is a rezoning approval. We're seeking merely to add the approval of a school use and related uses that are already in your UDO and appropriate without special use permit for the particular zoning where this land has already been rezoned. most of the questions that are coming from the neighbors seem to have been uninformed at best, misinformed at worst. We are happy to address that. I completely agree with your statement regarding the values that the school system espouses, which is why we're committed to reaching out to them. Unfortunately, the contact information necessary to meet UDO notice requirements simply isn't there. It's not available under the current Wake County indexing standards. So it does feel as if it works against renters and tenants. That is certainly nothing intentional on our part. And one thing I would like to just hit pause and stress is that our school site acquisition process is very objective. We have data provided from ORED ITRI consultants to identify current crowding, current and expected growth, by which they identify the greatest area of need for school locations. We search every property that was sufficient to fit school standards. Here we found one and only one that was sufficient to meet school standards. It had reasonable access to water and sewer, and it was accessible via 2 public streets that lead to a well-established thoroughfare. There was never a consideration of whether the neighbors were owners of mobile homes and lots or tenants of mobile homes or economic diversity. Our Wake County Public School families and students are all diverse. They're diverse in every way you can imagine, including economics, and we value everyone. If you look across the county, our schools are located in and next to neighborhoods of every economic price point as well. I think it is, I'm struggling not to say offensive, but I think it's frankly offensive for a public commenter to suggest that we would in any way target anybody. This was a purely objective location to meet the utility needs for the capacity that's so desperately needed in Wake County, and particularly in this Western Wake corridor. With that said, we're able to move forward with another site plan review meeting with the neighbors because we've already had one. Everything's prepared. All the speakers are lined up. We are happy to present it once again. And because most of their questions are really about how the site planning and the traffic will affect them, we believe it's more appropriate for them to receive the site plan presentation. That's different from the rezoning. They already understand what the long-range plans look like. What's most meaningful to them is how will the literal development affect us. So to me, slowing the rezoning doesn't have that impact. It's being able to better inform the site plan so that the public comments on the part that means most to them are informed and relevant, and we can share those with you. We will be able to do all of that in advance of the site plan hearing. So any questions you have to assure that those neighbors have been heard, any feedback that we've been able to share with you, we'll be able to provide. So we feel like we can do it on that timeline. And, you know, while I appreciate your recognition of the standards and values of the school system, when it comes to the UDO, the rules apply to us as it would for any developer. So we're prepared to move forward. We're prepared to do our very best to involve the folks now that we have the information and the ways to reach them. And we believe we can do that without delaying the process and without risking project delay, which of course is most concerning. I hope that's helpful.
Councilmember Killingsworth.
I have one more comment / question for Ms. Parker. If this project moves forward, I know some of your schools are designated to have pantries, food pantries and different things like that. May I suggest that this be considered one of those schools that have that readily available for your students here and families?
Thank you for that suggestion. I will be glad to share that with the design team and with areas of our administration that handle that.
Mayor Pro Tem Dozier. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I would say when I've asked about pantries, I've actually asked to be broader than that. So actually health and beauty items, because many times people need more than food. So it is sort of feminine care, personal care. So it's beyond that. If you're going to do that, I would suggest you do it in that way. And you'd also, I would suggest that it's in a way where students and other personnel who need those things can do it in a way where they can shop for themselves. So it's not prepared for them. They can, and in a way that they can privately access those items as well.
Thank you. I'll be glad to share those comments.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else? Further discussion? All right, hearing none. Anyone would like to proceed with a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this with the understanding that there will be meetings had, the community locally engaged, so that all their concerns are heard as well as can be.
Okay, thank you for your motion, Councilmember Killingsworth.
I second the motion, Stallings.
Okay, second, Stallings. All right. Any more comments or discussion before we move forward with the vote? All right, hearing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
No.
Thank you. Councilmember Killingsworth.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Gant.
No.
Councilmember Stallings.
Aye.
And Councilmember Mahaffey.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Motion passes 3-2. All right, thank you, everyone. We'll now move to public hearing number 4. And that is public hearing and possible motion to adopt an ordinance on the question of annexation. And this is annexation 701. And combined with the rezoning application for 20 CZ 14.
Good morning. As a recap from Tuesday night, this is the Hackney PUD. It's on Olive Chapel Road between Smith Farm and Linden Subdivision. The permitted uses would be single family, townhouse, and accessory apartment. And the density would be 3.5 units per acre. Since Tuesday, we did receive a new condition from the applicant, and I will read it. If permitted by the electric company, the developer will install photovoltaic solar panels on the pool house roof for connection to the electric grid. The photovoltaic system will be designed to produce 5 kilowatts. The system will be either owned or leased and will be turned over to the HOA. We did receive one comment that I will also read at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lofton. Any questions for Ms. Lofton before I open up public hearing for public comments? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and open up public hearing now for this item. And Ms. Lofton, if you could read that at this time.
Yes. I am Emily Census, and I live at 2890 Farmhouse Drive. My family and I moved here in December of 2019. And while we fully understood that the area was still developing, we are concerned about the current proposal of what will be done with the purchase of the Hackney tracts on Olive Chapel Road. One of the reasons this area is so special to us and our neighbors is that it isn't a high density housing area, and although roads are getting busy, there isn't traffic. There are townhouses lined along Richardson Road and Olive Chapel, but Olive Chapel was held up as a road lined with beautiful trees, single family homes, and farms. It is so disappointing to think that so much of Olive Chapel would be lined with stacks and stacks of townhomes without any trees. The change would be so stark. Another serious issue that should be taken into consideration is the effect on our infrastructure. Elementary schools are already capped, and although there are plans of a new school that can only sustain so much, taking on current overflow and now the addition of a highly densely populated addition of hackneyed tracks. I ask for your consideration to zone the property as a low to medium dense property, single family, and ask that we protect and conserve at least 60% of the trees on the property. Thank you for your consideration.
All right, and that's the last comment, so we're good?
Yes.
Okay, all right, we'll close the public comment period for this public hearing item. And I do see, Ms. Glennis, you're on the line. You would wish to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. What I'd like to do is the developer of the project, Randy King, would like to just briefly address council from giving responses from the last meeting, if that's okay. And he just raised his hand.
Okay, very well. Yes, Mr. King, proceed. Yeah, you have 9 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of Town Council. We appreciate your time, and hopefully I won't take 9 minutes, but we appreciate your consideration of this project. We believe that we have a project that fits well with the natural setting of the Hackney property. As you know, we have included townhomes as well as single-family homes, and this allows us to integrate the development within the biodiversity of the site while providing housing options for a variety of home buyers. I would point out that we have included alley-load townhomes, which will allow us to have homes with front doors that front on the collector streets, providing an attractive streetscape and encouraging a walkable community. After the previous council member, as you heard, after the previous council meeting, as you heard, we developed a condition based on our research into the solar feasibility. It turns out that we had done this in other markets within our company, but we've never done it in the Triangle market. I'm proud to say that we have a condition that allows this to be our first Raleigh market solar installation on an amenity. I hope it will not be the last. We take the environmental features of the site very seriously. We are working with our designers now. As you look at the property, you can see there's a lot of open spaces in the property that are currently fields, but there are also a lot of natural buffers and streams, lakes, and wetlands, and we are actively working to make the best, to preserve those areas in the best way possible. So we're very excited about this project. We appreciate your consideration, and we look forward to creating a community that provides housing options while integrating well with the unique environmental features of this site. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to address them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. King. All right, so we'll move this now to council for discussion or any questions. I know Ms. Brandy Vega is on as well, so if you have any questions for her, but I will turn over to council this time. All right, Councilmember Haffey.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate everything that the developer's done on this project. I think the environmental features are fantastic. I would have appreciated a commitment to complete and total tree replacement, but given that the site is, has a lot of clearing, I think that may happen anyway. To me, the school capacity issue is a showstopper. This is a rather large development. We have a crisis in elementary capacity space in Apex. All the surrounding schools are capped. We worked hard as a council to address this by getting the addition of a school in a project close by. We worked to expand the capacity of an elementary school that's being built. I'm disappointed to see the data that has not been enough to address the growth that's already coming. And I really had hoped that would be sufficient, but the data we have shows that it's not. So we need to keep working on this. So this time I'm going to oppose this project until we can find a solution and work with the school system to find a way to add more capacity at the elementary level.
Okay, thank you, sir. Further discussion. Councilmember Stallings.
I'm going to echo what Councilmember Mahaffey has said. I really appreciate all the work from this applicant and with staff to provide this possibility. As you all probably know from my previous comments, I'm very concerned about school capacity. It's something I've heard from residents for years. We are, as Councilmember Mahaffey said, it's our understanding that of the development that's already been approved. Now, Apex Friendship Elementary and the Depot 499 Elementary School will probably be at capacity. So we're back to square one. So I'm very concerned about the impact of that on quality of life for our children and families. So unfortunately, I don't think the timing is right to approve the project at this time.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
Thank you, Mayor. I think also, given the concerns the community has raised over many years that I've tried to amplify in different ways, including my votes against certain projects that were great projects, but it just, in my opinion, the impact was too great for the infrastructure and things that are out of our control, unfortunately. For me, the impact statement on the schools, even stating that with the schools online that it may help, is really a red flag for me. So despite this being a really quality project, done in a really nice way and presented in such a way too and responsive, for me, it's the wrong project and the wrong location at the wrong time. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to support it today.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilman Gant, do you wish to offer any comments before we proceed?
Well, I think we have numbers, so I have nothing more to add.
Okay, all right. Before we move forward, Ms. Vega, do you wish to make any comments?
Yes, Mayor. I would like to request that you consider voting to defer us to the April 13th or April 27th council meeting so we can gather more information, possibly reconsider options on this site and try to address your concerns.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, hearing that.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
That was Councilmember Killingsworth. Thank you. Sorry, Mayor. I'll make a motion that we defer to the, was it April 27th meeting? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Or a date?
Yes. Okay, motion to continue to April 27th meeting. Councilman Mahaffey.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I'll wait to see if the motion has a second first.
Okay.
Before I speak on it.
All right. Is there a second to Councilmember Killingsworth's motion?
Second, Gant.
All right, second Gant. All right, Councilman Mahaffey.
Thank you, Mayor. With all due respect to the applicant, I just need to point out that nothing's going to change between now and April 27th with regards to school capacity. So I'm going to oppose the motion to table till then. I could see maybe tabling it indefinitely. We don't have to go down with a denial here. We could wait to see if capacity. I know a denial, I believe, would trigger a 2-year waiting period. If we tabled indefinitely, we can come back once the school system has a plan in place to address the capacity. We could reconsider it at that point.
Okay, so we have the original motion to table to April 27th town council meeting. Motion made by Killingsworth, second by Gant. So with that, on the original motion, what I would like to do is go ahead and take a vote on that motion. And all in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no. All right, so Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
No.
Okay. Councilmember Killingsworth.
Aye.
Okay. Councilmember Gant.
Aye.
Councilmember Stallings.
No.
And Councilmember Mahaffey.
No.
All right, the motion is denied based on a number of 3-2.
Mayor Gilbert, this is Planning Director Diane Ken.
Yes. Yes,
I
ma'am.
believe under the UDO, the applicant is allowed to have one continuance by right. Is that correct, Lori?
So I don't have the UDO open in front of me. I believe there is a provision, whether that request by right is prior to the public hearing and comments, or if it's, you know, at any time in the process they can request that. I will leave that to your determination as the planning director.
Okay, I will need to take a look at the section, but I'll get back to you in a few minutes.
So, Diane, I have that section open. This is Amanda, if you would like for me to read it.
Yes, please.
Okay, the UDO states the body conducting the public hearing may, on its own motion or at the request of any person, continue the public hearing to a fixed date, time, and place. An applicant shall have the right to request and be granted one continuance. However, all subsequent continuances would be granted at the discretion of the body.
Okay.
In my opinion, it does not say at what point in the process the continuance needs to be requested, so I believe that their request by the UDO is allowed.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Ken, for that. And let me hear from Councilmember Mahaffey before we proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. Given what the planning director just informed us of, I move we reconsider the previous motion to April 27th.
Okay. Motion to reconsider the previous. Is there a second?
I'll second. Dozier.
Second, Dozier. All right, thank you. All in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
Aye.
Okay. Councilmember Killingsworth.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Gant.
Aye.
Councilmember Stallings.
Aye.
All right, and Councilmember Mahaffey.
Aye.
All right, that passed unanimously. So we will move this to April 27th meeting. Is there any further information?
Just a point of order, Mayor. I believe we have to have another vote. I think we just approved reconsidering the motion, and now we have to vote
That's
on the
correct.
motion again.
You're correct. I'm sorry. All right. Okay, so is there a motion to move to the 27th?
I think we just moved to a vote.
This is Councilmember.
Sorry.
Mayor, I believe the motion to reconsider was the motion, so I believe we
That's
just
correct.
vote now again on the motion. We do a do-over vote.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, my fault. All right, we'll get this right. Here we go. All right, here's the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Killingsworth.
Aye.
Thanks, Councilmember Gant.
Aye.
Councilmember Stallings.
Aye.
Thanks, Councilmember Mahaffey.
Aye.
All right, you have unanimous. All right, we're good now. All right, thank you.
This is Glenda Top. May I ask one clarification?
Sure.
With what Diane said and the vote that just took place, I just want to clarify. If we come back on the 27th, do we have to come back on the 27th, Diane, or are we able to have it just as one of the council members said, indefinitely, or are we committed to coming back to that April date?
So it does have to be on the agenda on April 27th. There can be further delay at the discretion of town council to a further date. The other option is to withdraw the application and start from the beginning, which typically will be a 3-month delay.
Okay, so right now we are on the agenda for April meeting. Okay.
Yes, and it'll be on that agenda regardless of what else happens because it's been continued. So it'll be continued, and it could be continued again. It could be a notice that it's been withdrawn, or it could be heard that night.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification, and thank you, Mayor, for letting me ask that question.
Always, Glenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, Lori. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to make one other clarification, and that is for both the public hearing number 4 and the annexation, which was public hearing number 5. So that's the rezoning and the annexation are both continued to that date moving forward, correct?
Okay.
Okay. And then I'd also like to ask for one other point of clarification, and this is with regards to public hearing number 3, which was the annexation for Felton Grove High School site. I assume that the motion for approval of that passed by a vote of 3-2 was for both the rezoning and the annexation. Is that correct?
Understanding, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Anything else before we move forward? Okay. Hearing none. All right. We'll move now to public hearing number 6. Public hearing and possible motion to approve rezoning application 21CZ02 Abbey Spring PUD. Ms. Lofton.
Okay. Hold on 1 second. So as I'm trying to get the screen up. As you may remember, this is a rezoning from plan unit conditional use to plan unit development. The use would be age-restricted apartments, and we have not received any further public comments.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions for Ms. Lofton before we move to open up public hearing? All right, hearing none. We'll open up public hearing for this item. No further comments, so we'll close public hearing. And the item is moved back to council for discussion, leading to a possible motion to approve. Okay, Councilmember Killingsworth.
My understanding is that there were a couple of items that we had requested regarding the lower age restriction, as well as the, I believe it was Councilmember Gant was discussing a pedestrian connection. Are there any comments from the applicant on clarification of those issues?
Can I speak to those? This is Isabel Maddox.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor and Council. We have heard back from neighbors. They were fairly adamant. This is a representative of the Glen Arbor townhouse community. They did not want that connection. We also have some topographical issues there, which will make it difficult. So we'd like to keep that as is with no connection. On the 45-year minimum age for any resident, I don't think that was done in response to comments from the Amherst neighborhood. We've not had further conversation with them since the meeting Tuesday night. We don't personally have a concern with taking that out. I feel like that takes care of itself, but we haven't had any further discussions with the neighborhood about that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Stallings.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of the age issue, I'm torn and a little bit about that. A couple of the Amherst residents commented to me that and reminded us that it was marketed as a senior project for seniors. And is it reasonable to conclude that going down to age 45 is generous if we're thinking about if it's marketed as a senior project? So that's one comment. And the other has to do with two questions that maybe the applicant can speak to. I think there was a resident who commented at the last meeting about two conditions they were asking about. One had to do with the dumpster location, and one had to do with the building and retaining wall setback. I think there was some compromise, but I was wondering if the applicant could speak to that in terms of the dumpster and the building and retaining wall setback.
Yes, ma'am. On the dumpster, you know, we have not engineered the site. We have not done a grading plan. And right now we feel that 60 feet is as much as we can commit to. We will certainly try to do better, and we may well be able to do better. But right now, with the engineering that we have in place, I don't think we can go any higher than that. What was the other question?
You're muted.
You're mute.
It was retaining wall height.
Oh, the retaining, yes.
Sorry, thank you.
Again, it's the same answer. Same answer, and probably even more so with retaining walls. We did increase the setback from Amherst to a total of buffer plus setback of 55 feet for building and parking. But for retaining walls, we're probably going to have to make that a little bit closer. So that's just a total of 45 feet. And we just, right now, without doing a grading plan and having a full topo survey, we cannot make that commitment to keep that any farther away.
Am I hearing you can't make that commitment now, and it's possible further down the road in the project you could revisit that, or not at all?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely possible once we get the data that, you know, our engineers need to have to make that call.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I would just like to ask that you keep that in mind as we move
Absolutely.
forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify my comments about 45 were only in regard to a companion. So that I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and as I said, we're okay to change that requirement or even qualify it to say that that only applies that as if there's a spouse of a resident 55 or older that's younger than 45 that they can live there. We're okay with that if that's what the council wants, to make that clarification. As I said, that this was something the neighbors wanted. You know, they had concerns. I share the council's questions and concerns that, you know, that person who's 44 years old and is a spouse of somebody who's over 55 is going to be, you know, some kind of a risk, but we're amenable to making that change.
And that request came from Ms. Seeger's daughter, and that minimum age, you know, was taken from that as a minimum age that we use on some of our other senior properties. And so that's where that was pulled from, and that was her request that apply to this location.
Yeah, if I could just follow up, I was just trying to talk about, you know, we're speaking of people who are older, and we talked about affordable housing. Again, if we're talking about creating an area where we're welcoming people who are, you know, who are able to live in Apex, who may not be able to otherwise live here, then if we create, so if we're doing that, expanding access, but then we're creating a barrier because of someone's spouse being younger than them, that sort of seems like we're creating access at the same time, a barrier. And if your average age is over 67, as you said, then perhaps that won't be an issue often.
And Tim, have you had any issues with that in your other projects where you had a 45-year limit?
Isabel, I can't speak to that we have or have not. I just know that when you have, you know, if the other definition of 62 years of age and older, that is super restrictive. That does impact a lot of spouses from being in there. Majority of our residents, as I said, are single, and the one question I would have I guess back to you, Isabel, and it may be out of your wheelhouse, but if we start saying whatever that number is, provided that it's a companion or a spouse, I guess, how do we define that legally and not run afoul? A companion could mean several things. You might have, in theory, you could have a couple of sisters, and the younger one is a companion of hers as opposed to a spouse. So that's my only, I guess, caution, if you will, if we start tacking on those labels associated with the other secondary age.
Yeah, I think the only way to do it is to say you have to have a minimum of one person over 55, and I don't think you can get into enforcing who lives in somebody's household.
I agree with that, because the federal definition says at least one member, 55, and it's very silent on the other parties to that. And so, when we have developed in other communities, the concern has been, well, we don't want it to become full of grandchildren. And so the Housing Finance Agency has sort of established, well, they're comfortable with the 45 minimum. And they have housing across the state.
Yeah, so I think the question for council is, we can either keep it as is, keep the 45 minimum age in there, or just take it out. And we're okay with either way.
Okay, thank you. I want to allow Mayor Pro Tem Dozier to respond, since this was a concern she brought forward. So do you have any comments?
I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that, Mayor. I feel like there was probably, I was thinking about, the Housing Finance Agency or the Housing Coalition, that would have language, whether it's an affidavit, this is a partner. I mean, I think people understand a sister is not a companion or partner, and that would be different. But if there's a legal relationship between two adults, I feel like there is an affidavit language that could make sense for that. I don't want to get too in the weeds of this, but I just don't want to, create an inclusive area where we're being exclusive at the same time. If you believe that it's not going to bear, I'm okay with the will of the council on this one. I just wanted to raise it, but I am okay with what my colleagues think about it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Killingsworth.
I just want to make sure that, these are people that are searching for low-income housing and affordable housing. So I want to make sure that we don't end up saying, no, you can't be housed because your spouse is 43. To me, that is a bit ridiculous. So my preference is to remove the lower age restriction to this. We're trying to provide affordable housing in any way possible within our community. So I would expect that the spouse would also be within those income restrictions. So we're talking about housing people that need housing that is not being provided already within the community. So my preference is to remove the lower age restriction. Touring the other facility, it was made clear that the average age is much older. The average person is single. So I do not believe that this is going to be a community that is filled with, younger people, because it is age restricted at that 55 level. So yes, and same thing with the pedestrian connection. I don't think we should preclude it from being there at all in the rezoning, and then say we have 10 years down the road, we have neighbors say, we would like to have this connection from the townhome community here. Because the same people that live there today may not be there then. So my preference is that that connection not be restricted to not happen at all in between those communities. So it would only, in my opinion, benefit the people that live in the townhome community should they want to use it. I don't foresee the people in Abbey Spring wanting to get to the townhome community, but vice versa. So my preference is that those two restrictions be removed, but I'll wait to hear from my colleagues on that.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Haffey.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to start by echoing the concerns expressed by my colleagues, Killingsworth and the Mayor Pro Tem. I personally would like there not to be this restriction. I personally would like there to be the option of the walking path. However, today I do want to support the agreement as negotiated between the neighbors and the applicant. My fear, well, how we got here is we got together with the neighbors and we spoke to them and we encouraged them to speak with the applicant, have some conversations, ask for some additional conditions, try to come to some agreement, and they've done that. And my fear is if we come at this stage in the game and change that, we're going to undercut the community's confidence in us as a council when we make these suggestions to people in the future. I mean, clearly in some cases, that's necessary. If we think something bad is, wrong is happening, we want to correct that. And I won't argue if people feel that way today. But to me, that's a big deal that we should consider is how is that going to look if us as a council come over at the last moment and change this here. So I do want to express my support for the process that's happened at this point. And I fear making changes would undercut that support. That's not the message I want to send. And one final note, Mayor, procedurally speaking, I would like to see a motion at the appropriate time to approve as presented, and then perhaps we could entertain some amendments from council members to strike certain conditions. That would give us the opportunity to express our support or opposition individually to them, while still maintaining us all the option of supporting the project as a whole at the end. So I think that would be the cleanest way to do this, is to, have a motion to approve the thing and then consider some motions from some members if they'd like to strike certain conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilmember Killingsworth.
Hearing that, I would like to make a motion to approve the project with the amendment of removing the conditions of the lower age restriction, as well as removing the amendment striking the pedestrian connection.
Just a
Okay. Councilmember Haffey, do you have a question?
Procedurally, if my colleague wouldn't mind, if she would withdraw her motion, I can make a motion to approve the project as a whole as presented. And then the council member could make a separate amendment motion to strike a certain condition is what I was getting at, if you don't mind. Because the motion as presented is still just one main motion to approve with certain conditions struck. It's not an amendment we can vote on separately.
I would be fine with that.
All right.
Okay.
So with that, Mayor, I'd like to move we approve the project as presented.
Okay. Motion for Mahaffey, approve the project as presented. Is there a second?
I second it, Stallings.
Okay, thank you. All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no.
Hold on.
Can
Yeah, I believe the council member would like to offer amendments.
Okay.
May I make a friendly amendment to remove the lower age restriction?
Okay.
I second that motion, Stallings.
All right, second Stallings.
And I like to make an amendment to strike the prohibition of the pedestrian path.
Point of order, Mayor, we can only have one amendment on the table at a given point in time.
Are we voting? Okay, we're voting first on that one. Are we voting in order? Not okay. Sorry.
Yes, as a point of order, Councilmember, we have one amendment, we debate that, we'd vote on that, then you can offer another amendment, we can debate that and vote on that, and then we can go back to the main motion as amended or not amended and vote on the package, whatever happens there.
We're testing Robert's rules today, and I appreciate that. Thanks.
All right, so Lori, stay with me on this because there's a lot going on here. So, okay, here we go.
I'm with you.
Okay.
So my question, Mayor, is do we have to ask Mr. Mahaffey if he accepts that amendment?
No, I mean, we have a motion on a main motion to approve the package. We have an amendment to that motion, which has been seconded. And friendly or not friendly, we can then now vote on that amendment. And then whatever happens there, we can consider other amendments. And then if there's no further amendments being offered, then we'd go back to the main motion as amended or not and vote there. So this is an exercise.
And in the morning, so.
Yeah. So did I get that right, Lori?
Yes. Yes, you did. Let's
Okay,
vote
so-
on the amendment. It's been made and seconded, so vote on the amendment only at this point. We're not voting to approve the project, only voting on whether to include this amendment.
Okay, got it.
So clarifying that so by removing the age restriction, that language, what it does is just say, it goes back to the federal language around that at least one member has to be that particular advanced age. Sure. Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion before we vote?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to speak in opposition to the amendment. To reiterate what I said earlier, I'd prefer to support the package of conditions as negotiated with the neighbors. I think doing otherwise may hurt our credibility in the future when we encourage neighbors to enter in these sort of negotiations.
Okay, thank you for your comment. All right.
And I would just say that I think the process that occurred is the way things should happen, where people engage with us, with the applicant, and it's a negotiation, and everyone typically doesn't get what they want all the time. That's called a negotiation, and then a decision is made. I am trying to clarify though the relationship between the person and then the spouse. I mean, I think that makes sense. I just don't know how the language related to that. So I understand that the permanent homeowner should be advanced age. I just don't want to knock out a spouse. That was my thing. I don't think that there should be, every apartment could have people that are in their 20s. I mean, but I just wanted to, I don't know, I would like to have that language, Councilmember Killens, were cleaned up related to the partner. And Lori, I don't know how to do that.
So I don't know how to do that either, and I'm not sure how we would do that and have it something that's enforceable by our code enforcement folks, our zoning enforcement folks. So it's problematic. I think that either we kind of keep with the federal definition that is easy enough, or we allow them to have their own restrictions regarding the 45 and not try to quantify what that individual may or may not be, how that relationship should be between the individuals. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Councilmember Killingsworth, did you have anything additional?
One more comment. I foresee this as, I appreciate the dialogue that's happening back and forth between the developer, the property, the community that's close to it. And I feel like this is a model for what should happen each time. The back and forth, the give and take, the compromises that are happening. I foresee our job in this situation as being, what is good for the community as a whole. And that's why my suggestion for, and my amendment for this, to remove the lower age restriction, I feel like is so pertinent, because we're taking into account the whole and not necessarily just this piece.
Okay, thank you so much. Councilmember Stallings.
I just had a question of clarification for Ms. Hoey. Are you saying, Ms. Hoey, this is going to be difficult to enforce if we take away the lower age restriction for the companion or spouse?
No, I'm not saying with the age restriction, taking that away will make it difficult to enforce. What I heard Ms. Dozier asking was some sort of a relationship between the primary occupant being over age 55 and the secondary occupant who may be under age 45. But that I think would be incredibly difficult for us to enforce, and even just defining initially is going to be difficult. I mean, if you're talking about spouse, is that a legal spouse within, under the laws of North Carolina? If you're, how you define that companion, I think is difficult for this council to do on the fly in this instance.
And I know we're getting in the weeds here, but is in terms of the second person, can we have broad inclusive language about spouse, companion, to keep it as open and inclusive as possible? Is that the plan versus limited it to spouse?
I mean, I think what the motion that's in front of the council right now is a motion to amend the motion to approve, to remove the lower age restriction. So I think it would probably be best to vote on that motion, on that friendly amendment at this point, and decide whether 45 is a deal breaker or not, I guess is the question. And then we could talk about, if that motion fails, other amendments.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
Yeah, so the language in the proposal, Councilmember Stallings, says companion or spouse. Yeah, that's why I was saying it's a legal relationship. My question for you, Lori, Ms. Hoey, is it enforceable the way it's written? Their policy of, 45, it says 45 years old. So doesn't that assume that this, or it's just the way it's written, it's an assumption, I guess.
I'm going to ask
Ms. Maddox.
Ms. Maddox has raised her hand. Let's let her chime in.
Yeah, the way it's written now just point blank states no permanent resident shall be under the age of 45. So there's not any requirement that that be a spouse or any other defined relationship.
Okay.
So again, an age limitation is very clear. When you start trying to define relationships, it becomes more complicated and much more difficult to enforce.
So I just wonder if it's cleaner to go by, the government's definition, and then we can just point to that. We've done that as a council before. It's just point to the government's definition, and it might be a cleaner way of doing this.
So what I'm hearing then is keeping it at the 55 and older and removing the lower age restriction is what you mean by that.
I think that's right. Whatever the government language is, I think it's cleaner.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, are we ready to vote on that?
So point of order, point of clarification, Mayor, just to be clear, what we're voting on now is to remove that restriction for the zoning condition related to the other people in the building.
That's
so
correct.
a vote of yes would remove it. A vote of no would keep it as originally presented.
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct, and follow the federal language.
Just want to be clear for everyone and for the public.
Okay, great. All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
Aye.
Okay. Councilmember Killingsworth.
Aye.
Councilmember Gant.
Aye.
Councilmember Stallings.
Aye.
And Councilmember Mahaffey.
No.
All right, that passes 4-1. All right, so now we move to the second amendment that was offered, and that was Councilmember Gant. Is that correct?
Yes, and thank you, Mayor. I was thinking about maybe readjusting what I was going to propose is what I'd like to see happen is maybe in 10 years down the road, if the mood of the neighborhood changes in Glen Arbor, that there be a possibility that maybe the developer wouldn't build this anymore. It would just be, I mean, I was wondering if an easement could be part of this, where it's, I guess it'd be in addition to the proposed, an easement be provided. That way, maybe the Glen Arbor folks can build their own, have the ability to in the future. I was wondering if that's something that might be, and yeah, just keep the buffer, keep everything else the same, but just an easement be part of the zoning. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Maddox, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, the only, and this is not in relation to what Mr. Gant just said, but if we take away the prohibition of the pedestrian access, and this is sort of a clarification from staff, would that then require the applicant to build that connection if there's no prohibition in the PD text? That's my concern, that there might be a requirement in the UDO that would force us to do it, which is absolutely against what the neighbors want. So I don't want to inadvertently cause that.
So I will defer to Amanda. I don't think there is anything in the UDO that would require that connection, but I just want to make sure.
There's nothing to my knowledge that would require that pedestrian connection.
Okay.
So Liz, this is Diane. The PUD originally had the connection, but that language has been removed. Is that correct?
Well, yes.
Okay, so yes, there's no requirement that they make the connection then.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, I guess that
Go ahead, Councilmember.
lead me to ask. Sorry, that would lead me to ask: would the applicant be willing to provide an easement, and not necessarily to build it, but just provide an easement for the sidewalk? That way, in the future, if conditions change, there may be a possibility of that being constructed.
I would defer to Tim Morgan on that.
I am fine with providing an easement, provided that it doesn't cause any issues with us meeting our buffer requirements and things of that nature. You know, that's my only question, and I hate to say, but that might be a Rick Baker question. I don't know.
All right. Yes, Tim, this is Rick Baker. I'm with Timmons Group. I'm an engineer on the project again. With the buffer we're providing there and the setback for the building and to Amherst, it's really tight. So committing an easement there, it's difficult to say what width of easement at this point we could commit to. Is that 5 foot for just a sidewalk? Is it 20 feet for a 10-foot pedestrian path? There's a lot of variations on the sidewalk there that's very difficult to commit to based on the previous question about retaining wall and dumpster location without having the site surveyed and topography completed and a full design. We just don't have those answers at this point.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Hoey, did you have a comment?
Yes, I was wanting to ask a clarification for either Liz or Diane, whether what we're needing here is a removal of a condition, or is there an additional condition that's going to be required as a result of this, notwithstanding the easement issue for the Greenway. But I'm just not familiar enough with this PUD document to know whether we are removing a condition with this amendment, or if we were talking about adding a condition.
Removing a condition.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Maddox.
Oh, I was just going to answer that question, but I agree.
Okay. Anyone else? So for clarification, Councilmember Gant, could you again present what you would like to see in your?
Okay. Well, the original condition was that the applicant would seek a connection with the Glen Arbor townhome development. Is that correct? And they requested that seeking become no. Is that, I mean, am I understanding how that changed, first of all?
That's correct.
What we have in the text right now is that the pedestrian connection is prohibited.
Prohibited.
Because we sought out and they told us they were not interested. And so that's why it went to that.
Right.
As Ms. Maddox just said.
Oh, I understand. I don't think that's going to last forever, that opposition. So that's why I'm trying to figure out, is there a way to not foreclose on this when they, I think inevitably actually will ask for that connection to be made. It could be 20 years from now, but I think inevitably they're going to want that because they're going to want to access these things on the side of the road there. But go ahead, Terry. I'm actually not throwing my thoughts together well enough. Thanks.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest, Councilmember, that it sounds like what you do want to do is to move to amend to strike that condition prohibiting the connection. If that passes, at that point, the condition would neither be required nor prohibited. Any potential easements could be discussed further down the road in site plan, and the option would be there in the future, but not required. So I think the cleanest thing to do procedurally would just be to strike the one condition and not try to wordsmith and ask for a new condition related to that.
Okay, I move to strike it and replace with the wording that was in originally there. Oh, you're suggesting actually to strike it totally and let that be discussed, not even replace with the other.
Well, that depends on what your pleasure is. But if you're looking to neither prohibit nor require it, I think you just want to strike the condition. If you want to require it again like it was initially, then you would, ask the applicant to reoffer the initial condition.
Well, it wasn't a requirement; it was a seek at the initially. I'd like the not require or require or remove. So I'd like to make a motion to strike that portion of the condition just entirely.
Okay. All right, is everybody clear on that? All right, so are we ready to vote on that?
Need a second.
Yes, I'm aware of that, but is everybody ready to move forward? Is that everybody good? Okay. Is there a second to Councilman Gant's motion?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I believe Councilmember Stallings is requesting to talk.
Okay. I don't see her hand on here. It went away from my screen. Okay.
I gave up, but now I'm going to try back in. I'm sorry. So just for clarity, we're voting to basically strike this condition, just period. So with the idea that down the road, years, if it wants to be re-entertained, it can be. But for now, there will not be any connectivity for this issue. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, cool. We have a motion and a second. All right. Any other discussion? All right.
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead, Terry.
Sorry, I was just going to speak in opposition to the amendment. Just to reiterate the same thing I said before, is I do want to be supportive of the process to this point, and I'm just concerned about making changes might hurt our credibility in the future. So although I'll say personally, I do think this connection makes sense, but I'm going to support the conditions as negotiated by the neighbors.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And Councilman Gant.
I guess this question to staff: if this condition proceeds and that language is struck, what are the requirements, if any, as far as on the site plan, easements or no easements, or like there's no requirement to seek anymore. It's just gonna be gone totally. So like, what will be the requirements in the UDO at that point?
This is Diane. Ken, there would be no requirement to provide an easement and through that buffer. They could voluntarily do it, but there's not a requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier?
Aye.
Councilmember Killingsworth?
Aye.
Councilmember Gant?
Aye.
Councilmember Stallings?
Aye.
Councilmember Mahaffey?
No.
All right, it passes 4-1. All right, are there any other amendments before we move back to the original motion to approve the project? All right, hearing none. Okay, great. All right, so we had a motion and a second for approval of the project. So now we are ready to take a vote. If before that, let's hear discussion. Councilman Gant.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just in discussion phase. I mean, I think the way I see those last two votes and how it affects the project as a whole is that we are looking out for the community, and I think that sometimes the interest of the neighbors does not always align with the interest of the community, and so I understand that there was a negotiation. We see Apex as a whole, which I think changes my calculation a little bit, even though I usually think that the neighbors negotiating with developers leads to better things for the community because they're the most impacted, but I don't think it always does. And so that's why I'm even more excited now, I guess, to vote for this plan as a result.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Anyone else? All right, Ms. Stallings, go ahead.
I would just like to add that several of you have already said this, but I actually really like the way this is negotiated out. Yes, not everyone always gets what they want, but I think it's been a model process from everybody involved. I know everybody's tired. We've talked a lot about this ad nauseum, but I think it's been a great process, and I appreciate the neighbors and the developers staying engaged as well as council.
And I concur with that. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Killingsworth.
Aye.
Thanks. Councilmember Gant.
Aye.
Councilmember Stallings.
Aye.
Thanks. And Councilmember Mahaffey.
Aye.
All right, that passed unanimously. All right, are we completely done with this project?
Well, Mayor, we do have the new business item to consider.
Correct. Yes, I just want to make sure we're clear with this one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right, good deal.
Well, can I say
All right,
welcome to Apex too?
Yeah,
For this project. I'm excited.
Okay, so am I. Great work, everyone. All right, we'll move now to public hearing 7. And you have on the screen possible motion regarding an amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance related to variances from the standards of the Watershed Protection Overlay District.
So just as a reminder, this is a variance to remove the requirement that an applicant did not purchase the property after the effective date of Section 6.1 and then request a variance in order for the Board of Adjustment, that they would not have to make that finding to approve a variance to the district standards. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. We did not receive any additional public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you so much. Councilman Gant.
Thank you, Ms. Bunce. Yeah, I just I thought about this more after a meeting a couple of days ago. So my guess is that this originally was written, that Section E, to assuming that purchasing a property would know the rules and would not have this, would know before they bought to not have this come up later. Is that your understanding?
I think the assumption was this was something like a buyer beware clause, but most people are not aware of the requirements of the UDO when they purchase a property.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Killingsworth.
So I appreciate this amendment requested by planning staff, because I feel like, the Board of Adjustment members are appointed for this particular reason. They're appointed to look at each individual thing that comes before them to make a judgment, and it shouldn't be based on a date. It should be based on the individual considerations within that property. So I agree with and support this amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Haffey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to point out to my colleagues, my perception of what's happening here. I think it's actually a big deal. I think what happened in the past is we strengthened our watershed protections. And at the time, we crafted this section, 6113, which is essentially a grandfather clause, which says people who purchased their land before we made that change, there's this option for the Board of Adjustment to for modification by variance. And it was specifically crafted to only apply as a grandfather clause to people who own their property before then. This proposed amendment expands that intent from a grandfather clause to a general ability to modify our watershed protection by variance. So I'll just ask staff, do you agree with my kind of perspective here that this is changing a grandfather clause into a general kind of right to request a variance?
So this is Diane Ken. Essentially, what has happened is that folks who would like to make changes on their property don't get a day in court because of this clause. And we actually have one example where they would remove impervious surface and make the situation better, but they are not allowed to do so. It would allow folks who want to increase impervious surface built upon area to go to Board of Adjustment, but in those cases, the water resources staff and planning staff would likely make a recommendation for denial. It does depend on the individual property, but we would like for folks who actually want to improve the situation to be able to go to Board of Adjustment. And our Board of Adjustment are very strict and very stingy with granting variances. So it just allows someone a day in court. That's how we see this amendment.
All right, anyone else?
And the other thing I would point out is all of these properties have streams in their property, and new subdivisions, they're on HOA land. So it really is difficult for the individual property owners, given that stream buffers and floodplains have been lotted on their properties.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and open up public hearing for this item. And my understanding, we don't have any additional comments. So with that, we'll close public hearing for this and defer it back to council for discussion, leading to a possible motion to approve.
Councilmember Killingsworth, I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Gant.
All right, thank you. Further discussion before the vote? All right, hearing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier?
Aye.
All right, Councilmember Killingsworth?
Aye.
Councilmember Gant?
Aye.
Councilmember Stallings?
Aye.
Councilmember Mahaffey?
No.
All right. That passes 4-1. Move now to new business 1. Assistant Town Manager Sean Purvis.
Yes, good morning, Mayor and members of Town Council. So this was continued from the Tuesday night as it relates to the Abbey Spring project that you just voted on a few minutes ago. This is a request from the Evergreen Construction Company that it would be, they're the developer of Abbey Spring. This would be a funding request of $171,700 in a grant that would offset recreation fees in lieu, as well as they're requesting a loan funding up to $500,000 in a permanent loan to support their project. That would be gap financing. They have applied to Wake County. That decision will be made in a couple of weeks at the Wake County Commissioners meeting. They have also applied for a 9% tax credit. That decision, though, I do not believe is until August. But in the meantime, they're trying to get all their financing in place. So this would be similar to a project that, for the Broadstone project that you made a decision on a couple months ago. They are not requesting the funds immediately, as the timing of the project would allow us to delay award of these, or actually issuing the loan until fiscal year 22-23. Council does have the ability to commit those future funds because we have a specific fund and funding source set up for the projects. And I stand by to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Purvis. Councilmember Killingsworth.
For Sean, my understanding is that approval of these possible loan money will strengthen a position at the Wake County level and possibly for the 9%.
That is my understanding. I know it specifically for the Wake County level it does, because when they factor in their points, additional funding or the lining up the funding does help the applicant and Wake County negotiate what the amount they would receive from Wake County is. The 9%, I can't tell you for sure. I haven't been involved in that process, so I don't know. I would imagine it does, but I can't make that 100% guarantee. They may still be on the line. I don't know if Tim's still on. He could answer that if he wanted to. But I know this is a new business item, but we're trying to do everything we can to strengthen that project. So.
Okay, Councilman Gann.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. Purvis, I was wondering about the amount of the loan and where that figure came from, and if it was based on precedent from the Broadstone amount or something totally different.
Each one, Mr. Gann, is completely individual. So each project they'll put their own pro forma together, and so the amounts that I expect that you will receive from projects are going to be varying. There's not going to be a standard for each project. What I do know in reviewing several performers, as we work through it with DHIC and then even here with Evergreen, each department or each apartment complex, well, this apartment in this case, each complex is unique. So there's makeup in terms of what the affordability is, how many apartments are dedicated to senior living, family living, 60%, 40%, 50% LMI, and each one of those dictates then what they expect their revenue to be off the rent. And so that affects the performance. So the number of apartments, the breakdown in affordability of the apartments, of our units, I should say, all of that will factor into how their performance is built. From that, they will identify what their gap funding is. So because they have their primary financer, then they'll always go to the county, then they look at tax credits. And then when in the end, we're kind of that last one. That's why we always have the third option, really, the lien, is what's the gap? What are they missing that would help strengthen the project for Wake County, for their Wake County application, as well as make sure the project goes through and allows them to offer the rent that they want to provide.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
So Mayor, just wanted to, I'll go ahead and make a motion at the appointed time. I don't know if this is the time. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think, consistent with our values and our principles, the only way to accomplish those things is by support. And so I'm ready to make a motion that we provide financial support to Evergreen Construction Company for affordable housing project noted as Abbey Spring at this time in the form of grants and recreation fees, and also for fee in lieu and a loan for construction contingent final project approval. That's my motion.
All right, thank you for that motion.
I'll second that, Councilmember Killingsworth.
All right, second, Councilmember Killingsworth. All right, further discussion before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye, opposed no. Mayor Pro Tem Dozier.
Aye.
Councilmember Killingsworth.
Aye.
Councilmember Gant.
Aye.
Councilmember Stallings.
Aye.
Councilmember Mahaffey.
Aye.
All right, that passed unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Morgan, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to say thank you to the council in your support of this entire process, as well as the financial support that you just approved. As Sean indicated, we have a layered financing in these type of developments, and the $500,000 that you just committed goes an extreme long way in filling the gap, which allows us also to reach the lower income seniors. So we have actually more units set aside at the 30% AMI than we do on our other developments because of your support. And I just wanted to share that with you, that these monies will be used in a fantastic way that will benefit the community for years to come. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Morgan, for your comments. Apex is with you. We're excited about this. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? All right, we got through it. All right. With that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.